There is a quorum present. Councilor Austin.
Mr. Chairman, I move for the approval of the proposed budget.
I second.
Okay, the motion's been made that we approve the budget, and the motion's been seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a lot of discussion.
Okay.
You're done.
Well, that's...
But,
Asking. Don't want to doubt. That was... Did I hear call?
no, you heard, I want to hear that.
Your agreement on that. Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah, I was just, had one quick question if Doug was going to introduce something, but I guess I need clarification if we're in fact going to vote on this or how we're going to discuss for the remainder of the day.
Doug normally does his presentation, and if there's no objection, we'll proceed with that unless...
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I assume that would move us into discussion.
Okay.
For the purpose.
I'm prepared, Mr. Chairman, to go to what level of summary or detail. However high or low you want to go, I'm prepared to go there. So, totally.
At y'all's discretion.
Oh,
I'll pass, thank you, Mr. Chair.
so Doug has said he can summarize it or go into detail. So what is the... You usually go into detail, right? Of course.
Typically I'll give an overview, which lasts a half hour, and then we'll go into each group, and I'll give a kind of a little more detail into each group. And usually that's when specific questions come out regarding funding or staffing that's pertinent to that particular group or department. But like I said, I'm ready to do whatever you got.
Then go ahead and do your initial presentation,
Okay.
and then we'll proceed from there.
Okay.
I just have one question for clarification. At what point do the department heads come in so that we can ask them some particular questions too?
Whenever we get to each of those departments and the general discussion after Doug's general overview, if we so request them.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate the opportunity to do this review again. I will make a few notes here that any references in my report, I hope everyone has their black book that's personalized, should have your name on it. 2011 review. Any references in that report to fiscal year 2010, our current year, those are projections based on 10 months of actual spending, and I projected out the remaining 2 months of this fiscal year. The comparisons to FY09 and FY08 are based on audited results, so those numbers won't move, and they are what they are. I've changed this report a little bit. You may have noticed a couple of tabs that were somewhat redundant, where in the past I've been able to drill down through reports where one tab would be a high level, the next tab would be the next level below it, and then the third tab would be even lower level. Well, I took those out and replaced them with the third lowest level report for discretionary funds only. The discretionary funds, what I'm referring to are the self-governance compacts to a certain degree of discretion, the general fund or tribal funded as it's referred to now, the motor fuel tax fund, motor vehicle tax fund, and indirect cost pool. Non-grants and contracts predominantly is what I'm talking about in these discretionary funds. So, and there's a schedule that I'll get to that'll itemize out those specific funding sources. I have a few bullets that I'll go over before I start the slide. And some of this, a lot of this is going to be things that you've already heard that I may put just a little bit different spin to or twist to it, where I may say it a little bit different than the way Callie said it, but we're probably getting to the same end result. Grant and compact revenue projections for 2011 are down by $29 million. One-time economic stimulus funds pursuant to the ARA account for 27 of that 29. The decrease, along with 30 million proceeds of debt for the Bonita Health Clinic financing, reflects nearly 60 million in revenue reductions. That's partially offset by a $7 million increase in third-party revenue and an increase in carryover of another $9 million. Now, that's not tribal carryover I'm referring to when I say carryover's increasing. Okay? So the net of that is a $44 million decrease. There's attachment A behind my memo. It would be behind your first tab. And I think that, Sheila, Tina had a specific question about itemizing these revenues, and that particular page is a really good reference for to see exactly where the revenue streams are moving. Next bullet, as reported last year, this proposed budget has a significant number of unfilled full-time positions. It contains funding for salaries and the related fringe costs for 2,922 existing positions at a cost of $145 million. Now, that's at the time this budget was prepared. In addition, the budget request contains 239 vacant positions at a cost of $13 million and 243 all-new positions, or at least classified as new positions, at a cost of $11 million. These 3,404 full-time positions account for $174 million, which also includes the merit increases for the next year. The purpose of pointing that significant number out of unfilled positions, which is in here 482, is because it's very unclear in this budget where the physical space requirements are provided for 482 new bodies that aren't currently on staff. The next major, what I consider a major point I wanted to bring up was the Tribal General Fund. We're all fully aware of what's going on with the Tribal General Fund. It has experienced significant budget reductions. The reductions include, but are not limited to, a lower dividends received from the business enterprises and a reduction in the discretionary carryover funding. The dividend levels decreased from $35 million to $25.8 million, or 26% from 2008 to 2010, this current year. Secondly, there's an intent to safeguard the tribal carryover funds in an effort to curtail the recent spending of these dollars. And we discussed that, and we probably will even more that extent. Certain programs and services also previously funded by tribal funds have been shifted to alternate funding. And I would add that whenever we talk about carryover on the tribal discretionary source, or the general fund as we used to refer to it, and we take these one-time dollars or savings account that's been accumulating up over the years, that had accumulated up until 2008 for a total of $45 million. In 2009, that $45 million eroded by $17 million for one-time appropriations. This year, 2010, the way we're spending through 10 months when these numbers were compiled, we may erode another $8 million. So I understand that Cali has project carryover in this budget for specific projects and some reserves that total $10 million. The amount that will be brought forward in March or April, whenever she has her books closed to the point where they can be adequately ascertained, is going to be prepared for it to be less again than what it has in the past. We're going to continue to see an erosion of this tribal carryover if two things don't happen. If we continue appropriating dollars for programs that are recurring programs, doesn't have to be salaries and positions. Okay? Just even if it's direct service programs that's coming out of this. Anything that's funding in excess of our current revenue streams is going to be an erosion of that carryover. So I agree with the administration on taking their aggressive approach to this. One reason I throw these numbers out is because I want you to understand that the revenue reduction we've been experiencing is very recent. When I say recent, I mean in the last 24 months, 30 months. We're seeing drastic reductions. case in point, it hasn't only been, 6 months ago, that we had to do a major realignment of our current year appropriation bill due to a adjustment of revenue streams by $9 million this year. To go from $17 million expensing in excess of current year revenue to 7 or 8 is an obvious, how would I say it? We could not have done it without very aggressive budgeting practices, and not just the budget. The budget's just a tool, but there also had to be a policy decision by administration to either, one, slow down spending, or don't fill vacant positions or new hire positions that were previously budgeted. Those two things had to be addressed, because if they would have spent their budget, I guess is the better way to put it, if they would have spent their spending authority, we would have seen further erosion going into 2011. The year that is concerning me at this point is 2012. Only because we have one more chance to balance this out if the dividends don't get back to the 2008 level. I'm an optimist. I think we should all hope for the best and pray that this economy gets turned around and we start seeing that coming through fruition into our books.
Councilor Thornton.
Doug, we receive these dividends from CNE, and if CNE starts up a new business, or they remodel, or they add a new casino, or they hire new personnel, don't that lower our dividends because our dividends come from the net, not the gross?
Well, not necessarily, Mr. Thornton.
You mean it don't lower it if they hire an employee?
Well, that's different than what you just asked the first time.
Don't that go into the gross?
Okay, if they expand operations, then the general thought is it's intended for a profitable return. Okay, if it's not, then yes, dividends will go down if we expand operations and we're losing money with the expansion. If we just simply spend more for the current operations, or that's yielding or that's supporting the same revenues, the same income at the same locations, and we're just increasing spending, sure, the dividends are going to go down. But expansion is something totally different than operational increase or less efficient operations. Does that answer your question?
Not really.
There's two different things there. They can spend. Now remember, it is on the net. It's on the bottom line. If we don't expand operations and revenue stays absolutely flat, but our spending goes up, 30% of something less is what we're going to get. And it goes back to the dividends based on a bottom line result and not a percentage of top line or surtax.
Is there anywhere in here where we can see the gross of the CNE by year?
No CNE information is in my report, only the dividend as a final result of its projection. So the dividend, the only thing that's in my report is the dividends based on a
Approximately an estimated 90 million.
90 million net income at CNE. That's the only thing in this report. But they have a
Well, that's where we receive most of our dividends, is from growth, it's from net of CNE.
Yeah. If I could, Mr. Chair. Yes. CNE provides me with an estimated forecast of net income for the following year, and that's what I base my dividend estimate on. I mean, we can get all kinds of charts and graphs from CNE if you would like to see them that show, here's the gross revenue.
The only thing I'd like to see is a gross per year.
Yeah, I mean, we can do gross and net, but it's not part of our budget when we put these budgets together. The only thing that goes into our budget is our estimated dividend income.
I have a slide on that.
The capital expenditures are not a deduction from the income because they're capitalized.
No. And I agree totally with what Doug's saying. As a business person, I'm not going to invest in something and expect to lose money on it. I invest in it in order to increase the bottom line. I hire additional employees because there's a need because of increased business. I mean, that's the philosophy there. And I know that C&E has done a lot of cost-cutting measures over the last year. You know, it was about August or September of last year when earnings started going down, and they have really put a lot of emphasis on cost-cutting measures. And Doug and I have met with Don LeBass a couple of times to go over their performance and what they're doing to keep their earnings up.
After all that, I still would just like to see the gross for the year.
Gross revenue by year? Okay. I can get you.
And just as an aside, as counselor of the councilperson of the Cherokee Nation, you have every right to get the budgets of Cherokee Nation Enterprises. You have every right to attend meetings. We have advisory board members that you know, or to communicate the happenings of C&E, but you as a counselor have the right to look at any of the budgetary information of C&E. And you know, as you know, we cannot forget that C&E exists for the Cherokee people. You are the elected representatives of the Cherokee people, so you have the right to look at it.
And we're providing it each month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
another.
would like to see a total gross per year.
Yeah.
It's also in our comprehensive annual.
Also, there's something else that we have to report on, and it may be in there too, but they give a report on it every month there for a while. And that's the total amount of cash that is on hand for C&E.
Yeah, that is included in their monthly financial statement.
Councilor Fishing on.
I was going to say, I think Tina requested all the C&B's budgets, all the company's budgets. I don't think she's received them yet, but I know she made a request in either yours or Meredith's.
Yes, and they will be provided to as soon as they approve it. And we do get them each time.
I think she's wanting the whole year.
Right.
And
But they have not actually approved their final one yet.
And keep in mind that C&E is one entity that pays dividends. Now, the Job Growth Act has given the legal authority and charge to CMB, Cherokee Nation businesses, to grow and diversify these revenues into non-gaming and create jobs. But as we do that, and we invest anywhere from $40 to $60 million a year into job growth, some of the output of that is acquisitions into new markets and new businesses. And some of those businesses are generating profits under the CMB umbrella. And at some point, I would recommend this body consider taking dividends from those companies as well. Because the reason being is they are funded with the non-dividend retained earnings of C&E. So the tribe has paid for those ventures once. Once they start generating retained earnings, they don't have to pay for themselves because the Job Growth Act already provided for the investment.
Could you just give one example of one of these ventures that you're talking about?
One of the companies of CMB.
So we take the dividend from CMB, but what are you suggesting?
Well, the companies. I mean, there's several of them. Under the CMB umbrella. I don't even know how many there are at this point. But several of those they're startups. Some of them are acquiring businesses that have been in operations for years. They have a profit motive and a going concern, and we're taking them and either continuing or developing and improving on what the company had done before. But if these companies exist out there and they're yielding income profit or net profit to CMB, I guess the question is, when C&E's retained earnings was used to purchase these companies or acquire them, the investment was paid from the retainage of the Job Growth Act. So as they generate income as a policy decision, I would recommend the body take a look at some of these companies paying dividends back to the nation. Where's the return to the shareholder is my question.
And I think that is a discussion for a regular E&F committee, and that we probably should look at getting our dividend from C&B.
I just wanted to throw that out because of the C&E dividend question.
And the net profit of C&B rather than the individual company. Councilor Jordan.
Would these, the money coming back from these companies, Doug, would they be shown in the budget for C&B?
I assume they would, yes. I assume they would be part of their consolidated budget.
And that's one of the reasons that I asked for the budgets of all the entities that were supposed to be delivered to this body by some form, either email or physically, prior to the beginning of these meetings, but I don't see that we got any budgets from anybody. And I'm quite concerned that that request was made a council meeting ago, and we've not seen any budgets by any entities that we could maybe factor in some of their profits on the shortages that we have this year.
Yes,
I can follow up with CNB, but I would imagine they are waiting until their board approves their budget, which generally doesn't happen until this month.
Right.
I will send an email to check on that.
I would like to just see the drafts. I would like to see something. I mean, they exist because of us, and we can't get any response from them.
I think in E&F you're told that whenever they approve them, they would send it. Continue, Doug.
Okay. The last point I just wanted to make was the scholarship program. It's already been addressed by Callie. They're requesting the encumbrance reserve between $3.5 and $4 million to balance the scholarship program this year. As stated before, I consider it a privilege to get to review the Cherokee Nation Comprehensive Budget. So I don't take this exercise lightly. And I hope that this review, once we get it finished, serves you well and gives you a good understanding or maybe even an increased understanding of the funding and the financial implications of your decisions. Moving into my presentation, first off, in your book, behind the first tab, behind the cover memo, Ms. Gloria Jordan had questioned earlier the revenue streams and what were they doing to reconcile, or what were they doing and the ability to reconcile some of this net increase, $43 million. If you look at attachment A to the memo behind the first tab, tab 1, the first tab, yes. Right, the second page in, you'll see a very detailed page. Okay, the top part's the revenues. And you'll see the $43 million. You see the large part of that 43 is the $30 million proceeds of debt. Also, $29 million intergovernmental, $1.4 million vehicle tax revenue reduction, slight increase on interest, slight increase on the dividends, and third-party revenue increasing by $7 million. So hopefully that provides the information asked for. The next page is simply a tabular data sheet for all the positions broke out by existing, vacant, and new for all funding sources. Now, again, this is all funding sources, no matter where it comes from, whether it's discretionary or not, to reconcile the total $174 million salaries and benefits. Okay. The first chart I want to go over are just that, those revenues. You'll notice from 2011 to 2010, that $44 million decrease. I've shown you in the current year revenues versus carryover. I think it's important for us to understand that when these budgets are appropriated in a comprehensive fashion for all funding sources across the board, there is significant amount of either entitled revenues or unexpended received revenues that are showing up in these green bars at the top. When monies come in one year and are expended in the next year or even 2 years later, You're going to see the effect in that carryover block up at the top. And we should always keep that in mind, especially on the discretionary funding sources. As things get tight, the green part of this chart is where we have to protect. And I think administration's done a good job of, in this budget, of taking whatever steps necessary to ensure that they have established certain parameters within the budget and follow through with it, not exceeding and going into those prior year revenues for current year appropriations. Once that carryover comes on board in March or April, just keep in mind that whatever is funded out of that amount will not be in carryover the next year. And we'll continue to see that balance erode. There's some certain spikes on this chart. Obviously, 2009 is a significant spike, and that's the effect of the Hastings Hospital coming in to our system. The next chart will be the revenue or the expenditures. And you can see significant growth from 2006 even. We were slightly over 323 million up to 528 million in 2010. Now you notice the decrease going into 2011, and we talked about what's driving some of that decrease. But there's also of that funding source decreases, there's also important to understand that what is that affecting? Well, the roads is coming into this equation where we're seeing the expenditures of 2011 run off of some of the economic stimulus funding for roads, the one-time funds, and contract services as a line item is going down by 40 million. Now, that 40 million contract services, roads is 12 of it, community health is 12 of it. There's an enormous amount of contracted services in this comprehensive budget that goes unexpended from year to year to year. Now keep in mind, this particular chart doesn't have any transfers in it. It doesn't have any capital expenditures in it, and reserves by appropriation. Let me move on and get into more meaningful detail information. Here's your dividend chart. You can see from 2008 to 2010, a $10 million decrease. And the general fund, in a nutshell, this has more impact than anything else we'll talk about of the direct services that are being revisited or reduced or eliminated in this 2010 budget. It's because of where we are compared to where we were. We created programs at a $30, $32, $36 million dividend level. We created programs back then under the assumption that those revenue streams would continue, or hoping it to, and as it did not continue and we're in this economic lull, then obviously certain things, difficult choices have to be made. And Mr. Chairman, let me clarify that although I'm going to sound like at times that I'm praising administration for a job well done of being prudent with the revenues that they're faced, I want to make sure one thing's clear. I don't take a position on what they're recommending these revenues be used for. I'll show you what they're requesting and also where the funds are in the event that this body would like to reprogram where some of the administration's requests are. Indirect cost pool, we talked about it a little earlier. We used to see some red bars down at the bottom of this chart. What those red bars meant was that the indirect cost pool was either under recovering or growing at a pace faster than what the programs were paying in. It's good to see the blues at the top because this is information that is critical in understanding. It's enabling that IDC rate that's on there to continue to go down. When you see a rate going down consistently, It's due to a consistent increase in the base, as well as the pool, if you look at it like overhead in a business, is more efficiently managed overhead. If rates start going up, either the pool or the programs are going down, or the overhead expenses are going up as it in a relationship. Callie said that this particular year, now she's got her indirect cost rate approved by the Inspector General of 14.26. That's one of the lowest rates that I've seen since I've been here.
Councilor Sutton.
Yeah, I apologize for being out of the room, Doug. I'd like to go back to this previous slide just for a second. And I've got a question about these C&E dividend income that we've got up here on the chart. It's indicated that these are budgeted dollars that we expect C&E to pay back to the tribe. And my question is this actually the budget number, or is this the actual number that was returned? Because sometimes there's a difference of $10 to $15 million. So the question I have is this an actual budget number reflected in this graph, or is it an actual? I know in 2011 it's a forecasted number, but 2010, 2009, 8, is that budget?
Those are budgeted numbers that are tweaked throughout the year in the event that we see the dividend level is going to either have a surplus or a shortfall. Okay. If we think we're over
so they're
or under,
close to actual.
They're pretty close to actual.
Numbers. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, they're very close. And just like we did this year, in the years past, whenever dividends are coming in at a pace that's going to exceed it or fall short of it, then typically Callie will bring in an adjustment budget and say, hey, we've got extra money we can put on here, and that is represented in a budget.
Thank you.
Here's actual, it's very close to 09 is a lot.
Yeah,
No, just the actual.
Yeah, that's pretty close. Yeah, these are real close.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Messer.
Doug, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the IDC pool. Even though we collect IDC money from grant dollars, does that go back in the IDC pool, and then is it discretionary once it goes into the IDC pool?
Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Because we can control our indirect or overhead rate through these budgets.
Okay. So
Typically, it takes a year to get that effect implemented.
Yeah.
Because it's, we do basically a IDC proposal, and it uses like an audit of the year before to do the rate for the year next year and ahead. So there's a 2-year lag.
So basically, the IDC pool is on discretionary dollars.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were to cut budgets within the indirect cost pool, it wouldn't free up dollars on Gen Fund.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, it has to be a permanent fund. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this chart? Okay. Okay. Then, talking about the salaries, I have handouts. I know there were several questions earlier. This first one is a salary detail for the general fund only. Okay. And the second one, in your report, you're going to have a certain amount of very detailed information on these staffing packages by group. That's going to be from all funding sources for that group, no matter where the funds come from. This next report is a discretionary, which would include Gen Fund, motor fuels, and all the compacts. Okay. Now, some of these reports you started asking questions earlier that the answers would be contained in these two reports. The reason I gave you the gen fund only is because it's the absolute most discretionary funding source we have. Thank you. Looking at across the year for the salary by function, you'll notice that the governments and boards groups haven't really changed much in 4 years. It started at 10.2 and it's at 10.9. But the total salaries have gone from 131 million to 174 million, or 43 million. 41 of that is in the service groups. The increase predominantly that I'm seeing in here is in the health group. Now, part of that is due to Hastings, but it's a consistent growth. In other words, from the 2010 to the 2011 budget, there's a $15 million increase in total. $17 million in the service groups. Of that 17, health went up $17 million in these two from one year to the next. So that I just want to make sure that everyone understands this growth in positions, employee salaries is primarily in the health group. The next chart are the actual positions. You can see that it's tracking right along with the salaries. And of the 170 increase from 2010 to 2011, 144 is in the health group. I think that's a good thing. Okay, this next chart shows it in total, not broke out by groups. You can see that the new positions in here have $11 million attached to them. The vacancies have $13 million. I will point out that of the 24, whoops, did I go to the, on the wrong? There it is. Okay, sorry. Of that 24 million that's in the unfilled positions for new and vacancies, 20 million of that's discretionary funds. 15 health, 2 million in education, and the rest of it spread out all over. And that big increase in 09 from 08 again is Hastings. The staffing levels, you can see we talked about the 243 new and the 239 vacancies. I think Callie is, of that 482, I think she's reported about 60 of those were either already were filled subsequent to the budget compilation, or they were just errors in the way that the payroll worksheets were filled out. One thing I will point out on this particular chart, unfilled positions in 2009 of the 3,190, 12% were unfilled. In 2010, 16% were unfilled. And this budget, 14%. Obviously equates to a significant amount of dollars. Of the 239 vacancies by group, here's a pie chart showing, and obviously you can see that the health group's a large chunk of that with 94. The next largest would be human services with 40. Of the health, 94 new positions, 75 of those in direct care, or clinics or hospital positions, and 14 are in administrative support or the group leaders. The human services is showing 40 vacancies, and of that 40, 21 of them are in children, youth, and family services, with 7 vacancies in both child development and child support. You see there's several vacancies, several departments, of course. The next one will be the new positions. Again, the new positions, 148. Now, when we say new, New is supposed to represent positions that have never been in our budget before. That's what new is supposed to mean, that they're brand new to this fiscal cycle. And, as Callie reported, there may be a few discrepancies here, probably not 243 anymore. But health had 148, and of that, contract health has 12 new positions, Salina has 22, Muskogee has 26, Hastings has 18. Education department has several new positions in it, at least are classified as new. There's 29. 15 of those are in Head Start. 4 in the language, 3 translators, 3 in directed studies. Now there is in these new positions in this budget, Career Services has 14. 9 of those are on a day work program. And I'm not really sure what's going on with that particular budget, but I point that out because the day work program itself is significantly decreasing its funding level. I think it was reported earlier there's a 1.3 million decrease in that program. On tribal, they picked up 500,000, approximately $500,000 of funding on, I believe, HUD or NAHASDA. But these positions are classified as new hires.
I believe Callie had mentioned earlier that those were filled this last year, all 9 of those. Is that
and
correct?
that's an example that I gave where those positions were added in a budget mod for 2010. In fact, if you look at the payroll worksheet, there's an employee number there indicating they were filled. That was just an error. And in the budget mod, part of the funding for those salaries, even though they're listed as tribal hires, I believe Diane reported in E&F on a couple of different occasions that part of the funding would be coming from her OJT program, work experience, some of the clerical staff. And the concept there is we're still requesting the funding for the staffing for that program, but the actual payments to the trainees would come from programs that are utilizing those trainees.
Councilor Jordan.
Well, I have no doubt that Diane Kelly will keep them busy, but I would like to hear that those 9 people are being placed in doing alternative work since we are reducing that at such a great amount.
Well, we're not necessarily reducing the activity there. What we're talking about reducing is the gen fund or the tribally funded stipend, the $50 gift card that's given to them at the end of the day, that training stipend would come from the program that they're working in. For example, in my group, if I had a day work trainee who was a clerk, I would pay for it out of my budget.
Okay, now let me throw this out to you. If your budget's paying for the trainee, why can your budget not pay a portion of the 9 people that are being employed to send those people to you? Which is federal dollars in a lot of instances. If it was NAHASDA money, we could take a portion of NAHASDA money and pay for however many of these positions it would take for the people that were going to improve NAHASDA housing. I mean, why is it coming from tribal funds when those are federal dollars? Why don't we put these 9 positions into federal dollar slots?
Well, I'm not totally sure I'm following what you're saying there. When we evaluated this program and tried to reshape it, it started as a tribal initiative. There's not a lot of the stipulations on it like there are for federal funds in terms of income levels, all of those things. The staff are in Diane's shop. They know that program. They know it as well as the other programs that they administer. We could possibly look at that. That's just not the concept that we had as part of our structure for this plan, because it almost becomes an employment service.
But what are these 9 people,
They would
what is
be,
their total cost?
just a second, I can get that for you.
If the benefit is going to a federal program, then the people that provide that benefit are to be paid for by the federal program. I guess that's the simplest way that I can say it.
Yeah.
It's a great program, and now I think we need to take it to the next level, and let's get some federal dollars sponsoring that program.
It's about $217,000.
Okay, so if we could shift these 9 positions where they would be paid for by federal dollars that they're actually sending their work product to, then we would save $217,000 of gen fund money that could go to direct services of people.
Let's think about it just down that road, but slightly different. If this is a cost that is not easily attributable or assignable to a whole lot of programs that it's servicing, then if this thing works fairly well, we need to look at inclusion into the indirect cost pool. If they're servicing 75% of our budget, federal funds, and they're dispatching these people out to 75% of them is federal funds, that's the whole purpose of the IDC pool. And that would free up the money.
That, again, is something that we could look into. The concept was Diane's got the staff, she's got them in place, they have their processes, and in order to keep the program going, keep those staff where they're at, but the cost of the gift card at the end of the day would come out of individual programs. What we may look at doing is revamping that whole program and turning it into more of a, putting them on payroll as a temporary employee.
If I could continue, I'm not saying take it away from Diane Kelly, because she has administered this program to the level it is now, and she's to be commended for it. I'm saying take the federal dollars and put them over in Diane Kelly's group. I know we can do that with Nahasta, because we got Nahasta dollars spread out all over this tribe. That 31 million, by the time it's reduced down to housing, is only 10 or 11 million. So the other 20 million is already spread throughout tribal departments. I'm saying take those federal dollars, give them to Diane so she can fund these 9 positions.
Right.
And then in turn, she sends all the work product of these 9 people back to those federal programs for them to benefit from it.
Okay. The one point I would like to make, there is a portion of these people's salary being charged to Nahasta under the Career Services Day Work Training Program. It's the equivalent of 2 FTEs. I guess my hesitation at this point is that this is sort of a pilot program. I don't know what funding source to charge these people to, unless we go back and come up with a way to justify it in the IDC pool, or put a surcharge to the program, and then it's not as attractive an alternative for the program as a service to the program. So I understand what you're saying, and I will go back and talk with Diane and see what other options there might be. But as far as just saying, here's a federal source to fund this, I don't know of one.
Well, to me, this seems like the year that we need to become somewhat creative.
Yes,
And I know that y'all are fully capable of doing that.
and we have
And this is
tried
another
to do
source
that.
of where we can be creative and still be quite legal in what we do, and free up some money that could be used for direct services. Because direct services is the thing that's took a hit in this budget. I mean, direct services to the people is what has took a hit. And folks, that's why we exist. We exist for the people, and there's nothing in this budget for the people.
I don't want to be argumentative,
And
but I would say I
that's
disagree.
not a question, Callie. That's just,
I do disagree
that's my
with that.
personal comment.
I think we need to, I would want the treasurer to take a serious look at funding this out of the indirect cost pool, because that's exactly what the pool's there for. When they service programs and we can't easily charge out to 400 federal budgets, somebody's time, then we throw it into the pool and allocate it out based on a rate. That's what it's for. And if we find out that this thing starts going, goes forward into 2011, and the majority of it is not federal programs that they're dispatching these workers out to, but they're tribal, then we probably need to not put them in the pool. But since it's a pilot, it'd probably be
And I don't.
good thing to wait and see how it
Like I
goes.
said, I don't disagree with that in concept if we can justify it in the pool. However, if we throw it in the pool and then find out it's not going to be allowable, then we've created a problem for ourselves. If we can negotiate it into the pool for, say, 2012, maybe that's the right way to go. My concern is to make sure that this pilot and this concept works before we start negotiating with the IG's office to include them in the pool.
I think the last chart I have is the motor fuels tax, and you won't see much change there, except in education. We're seeing an impact there of some transfers and reserves, the incumbents reserve being utilized, and everything else is relatively flat from year to year. I believe that's, I've got one more. Some discretionary funds. Oops. I've got a few more than what Callie had on hers, but I've got the education advocacy and the language technology has been touched on in the education service for $159,317. Also, the indirect cost pool has an office of historical records in it for $171, and those 3 DOI initiatives. And my understanding is, I believe one of those may be a funding shift. Is that correct?
Yes.
On the land lease or feeder trust fund.
It's the digitization project.
Oh, I didn't put it on there. Yeah, I
Oh,
knew
okay.
it was. I knew it was a continuation, but the DOI compact's bringing in some new budgets here for about $400,000, and a small IHS behavioral health.
Can we get a copy of that sheet for tomorrow?
Sure.
And
Yeah, that's not in your
Is it here
book.
somewhere?
It's not in your book.
Okay.
I mean, you can find them in there real easy when you look at the discretionary dollar, the next
One on the sheet
tab.
would be so much better.
Yeah, I'll sure.
If I could, Doug and I talked about this slide. Those first 3 items are, Melanie talked about the education advocacy and the language technology. That's pulling out of other budgets to set up a standalone budget. That's the same situation with the Office of Historical Records. It is funded through the Support Services Group for 2010. For 2011, I pulled it out into a separate standalone budget. It's not an overall increase. It's just moving it from one accounting unit to its own standalone accounting unit. Yeah, and Pat does make a good point. We talked about the digitization and some of those projects that were formerly funded through Gen Fund, we're moving them to DOI for the ongoing costs there.
Mr. Chairman, that completes my overview.
Yes, Councilor Coates.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I would move that we go ahead and take a detailed look at the education group. First of all, Secretary Knight has informed us previously that she has other appointments tomorrow that will prevent her from being here. And if we could take a look at this, we would have her available today to answer any questions. So I would move that we look at that first.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of looking at education, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Doug, would you like to
Yes.
look at education?
Jump back to,
Is that tab 6?
tab 6, education. The first slide is the total budget. You'll notice a significant unexpended balance here on every year. A lot of that's Sequoia High School. Of the 20 million projected to be unexpended in 2010, 7.5 of that is Sequoia High School. Higher education is 4.7, so that's an anomaly there, because to forecast out or project out when you only make 2 expenditures in a year, it creates, so that the 20, don't get hung up on the higher education component of that, because it's not going to happen. The education reserve is figured in here at about 2.5 million, and the culture department. Now,
Councilor Jordan.
Could Rita expand on why we have 7.5 million projected to, I guess, carryover? Is that what you're talking about from Sequoia?
A lot of that's construction dollars. Some of it's not. But I'll get into the actual departments in a little more detail after I go through 4 slides.
And will Rita be available when that happens?
Yes.
Okay. You'll be here with us, right? Okay.
It won't take me long to get through my slides here for the education group. The one I was going to say, the culture department does have a consistent average of around 1.5 million going unexpended in all these years being presented. The funding sources for the education group, you can see it's largely federal funded. The general fund is falling off a little bit. You can see the motor fuels pick up. Now that pickup on motor fuels, the scholarships and the use of the encumbrance reserve that's been mentioned. And obviously what sticks out on the charts, the federal funds in the budget compared to the 09 actuals, and that is representative of those carryover dollars that's going unexpended from year to year. The next chart is the salaries and benefits. There's 1,004,000 in new positions, and that's 29 positions. And I will comment that on 11 of those, so we'll get into the next slide and go on into the positions. There's the 29 new and the 17 vacant positions. So we're seeing 29 new on top of the 17 that's unfilled, and of the 29, 11 of them are from discretionary funding sources. Of that 11, the 7 of them are in the culture department and 4 in higher ed. The childhood development department, compared to the previous budget, has a $3.8 million decrease, 29%, and it's in the Head Start and Early Head Start grant funding, as well as matching in-kind revenues for 2011 compared to the previous year. Compared to 09 actuals, the childhood development has $1.5 million increase in its budget over the 09 spending level, predominantly due to one-time economic stimulus funds for the expansion budget. The culture program has basically no change in it from year to year, but it's a $1.5 million increase over 09's actual spending. And again, the culture program has a history of underspending. Its current year spending is projecting underutilization in the current budget, $4.8 million in spending on a $5.8 million discretionary funding level, and I emphasize the word discretionary. And very likely could have $1 million unexpended funds by the end of September. The next department is the Executive Director of Education. We need to look at that particular program, excluding the reserves, or it will be distorted. It's being decreased budget to budget by $474,000, and compared to 09 by $382,000. And both of these decreases are due to not altering its budget, or compared to the 2010, except for removing the Art Institute budget, which was out of discretionary funds, and that's what's driving those decreases. And the higher education department, we're seeing no significant variance compared to the current, or to the 10 budget level. Should be 10, not 09 in the book, but nearly $2 million increase over the 09 spending, and we're all fully aware of how that program has increased its scholarship award since 2009. Now, the program has requested again to utilize $4 million of the scholarship encumbrance reserve as a one-time funding source to get through this budget cycle. And I've noted the programmatic changes that we're all aware that Ms. Knight's working on, or alternate sources of funding will be required to keep this program at this level after 2010. We were able to get a one-time fix out of the encumbrance reserve to keep this thing in balance and fulfill the obligations of this school year, not fiscal year, but the school year. So I think appropriate actions are being taken to address that. The JOM program has an 8% decrease, $184,000, due to a $150,000 reduction in the special project budget and a slight 4% decrease compared to '09. The Learn and Serve program has significant decreases, $850,000 compared to our current year budget and over $500,000 compared to '09 because the Serve America program, or federal funded program, significantly reducing its projected funding level for next year. I'm not aware either, maybe the grant is running out or a multi-year grant may just be running its course. But the Sequoia High School is the last department within the education group. It has a $1.5 million decrease compared to the 10 budget, partially due to the non-recurring economic stimulus funds of $463,000. The facilities are going down by $312,000, and various requests of discretionary funds in the previous budget, like the 7th and 8th grade project and the motor fuel tax subsidy, all contributing to that decrease. Now, it is a $6 million increase over '09, or 67% increase over what we spent. And again, this is what I talked about earlier. This program's consistently underspent its budget. In fiscal year '07, the school spent $8 million out of nearly $16 million budget. In '08, it spent $9.5 out of a $15 million budget. In '09, it spent $9 million out of a $20 million budget. And in '10, it's projecting to spend $9 out of a $17 million budget. So these are very significant carryover dollars coming out of Sequoia High School. Part of this is capital expenditure related. It's part of project funding for, I guess, facility expansions and things of that nature. Other part of it is not. So,
Councilor Jordan.
Doug, can you tell us of this money, what kind of travel dollars are we sending up there?
okay, if you'll turn over to the next page. Okay. And flip through that till you get to the Sequoia High School. That'd be, I guess, page 8 in the lower right-hand corner. You'll see there is no tribal funds requested here. There are no motor fuel tax funds requested here. The vehicle tax is the apportionment for the Sequoia kids. The rest of it's all Department of Interior and the small Department of
It's all federal dollars.
Yes. Except for the cartel, yeah.
And that's what
Yeah, those apportioned dollars. That completes my review of education.
If I could get this night, if I could just sneak you up there, I just want to, I'm not debating your budget, I just want to just kind of give me your take on culture and Sequoia understanding, kind of give me your take on that.
Okay, I will. Culture, this attribute that rolls up to culture in Doug's book is an attribute that we assign to every AU, and so there's many AUs under that. Included in that is we combine the 7th and 8th grade with the elementary. The immersion school had an attribute of culture. When we combine the 7th and 8th grade with it, it is still assigned to the culture attribute. So the entire elementary school is found under this roll-up. So it's kind of a misnomer a bit because the elementary school is also included in there and not under the Sequoia attribute. It has had a history of underspending, and so that was one area that we looked at very critically during our several rounds of budget discussions. Some of the things that we did that have impacted what's going on with culture, where there will not be nearly an underspending in 2011, is that we split out this education advocacy effort, which will utilize staff from the existing staff that we have on board, but it just splits it out from the AU. So that was a reduction to the culture budget. We also eliminated the entire arts initiative. So you'll notice that AU is zeroed out. It was several $100,000. It was zeroed out. We are combining that staff under the culture budget. And again, we'll be absorbing some of that under expenditure that you've been seeing in previous years. The next thing that we did was to, we have the partnership with NSU for the Cherokee language degree program. We directly fund staff that staff the program. We also provide, under an MOU, a contract amount with MSU to operate the program. The staff for that program have been absorbed into the culture budget as well. So we absorbed several items that we reduced other places in order to, one, absorb the under expenditure that was going on, and to reduce the overall gen fund request. And so that's what you're seeing here, is not a large change in the culture budget because we've absorbed a lot of activities from other units. So you won't see the under expenditure in 2011 that we've seen in previous years.
What about Sequoia?
At Sequoia, we have accumulated some carryover over the years. We're beginning to expend some of that, but we must do that carefully because we don't want to, for example, hire on staff that we'd have to let go at the end of the carryover business. So we target carefully what we spend those funds on. About $5 million of that, though, is in construction, and we're trying to spend that down. Those construction projects are now underway in a very major way, and we expect to expend those in pretty short order. But they sat without progress for quite some time, and Rita can speak to that if you'd like to hear more about those projects.
Thank you. Councilor Fishing.
Melanie, I missed part of it. Can you talk about the DOI, self-governance, or cultural resources again? I didn't hear.
Sure.
I noticed there's a $200,000 increase.
Right. The cultural resource budget overall is funded partly with DOI, partly with Gen Fund, and it has history of underexpending, and that is a very fair statement. It's been consistent over the years. When we looked at how to consolidate, how to be more efficient this year, we reduced several different units and absorbed those activities under the umbrella of culture. The NSU degree program staff, the arts staff, and you'll notice that also the 7th and 8th grade come under this attribute of culture as well. So a lot of things got absorbed into that area without increases, and then we decreased the opposite side. So we eliminated the arts budget.
Okay, the other question I've got is Cherokee's helping initiate progress, because I've had several emails go out on this. I know some of the people that's on it. At first I thought they was employees, and now I realize they're contract people. And I had asked you all if it was in this budget, and you said no, it had been zeroed out, and it was the in-kind contribution to something.
It's the match to the Learn and Serve.
To the Learn and Serve? These 12 people, have they been told that their program's not going to be renewed and they're not going to have that income, that job, that contract?
Yes, in fact, you'll notice that the Learn and Serve federal part of the grant drastically reduced, and that's because we were at the end of a 3-year run on that grant. The grant ended. We applied for a follow-up one, and were awarded 1 year at a lower amount. So you see the amount in the budget is much lower than it was in previous years. We were also awarded an AmeriCorps planning grant for $50,000, and we expect that AmeriCorps, once we apply for an implementation grant, will be able to do similar activities as the Learn and Serve did in previous years. So hopefully we will, once we get through the planning, we'll apply for an implementation grant for AmeriCorps.
Okay, my question is the 12 people that was provided for salary-wise in this budget, come October the 1st, will they still have a job?
I cannot say that they will. I don't believe that they will. And I think they've known for some time that the grant was coming to an end. Go ahead.
If you're referring to the CHIPS, those are not employees of Cherokee Nation. They had contracts, and those contracts obviously are only for 1 year at a time. So we're not talking about employees of Cherokee Nation. We're talking about contracting.
Okay. Has these contract people been told, come October the 1st, they ain't going to have a check coming in?
Well, I can't say what communication. I do know that the program staff have known that the program's coming to an end, and we have one volunteer that is in the office. So I know that volunteer is aware. Now, whether we've sent out a letter or whatnot, I can't speak to that. But,
Could you get me the numbers of 12 and I'll call them? I'm wanting them told.
We can notify them, yes, that's no
Okay,
problem.
they need to be told, because they're calling me, wanting to know about this or that and different things, and they need to be told, no, folks, you ain't gonna have a check coming in, you need to look somewhere else. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Cobb.
This may be for Doug. Tell me on under motor fuels tax, I'm trying to get on the same page here. Why did higher ed graduate scholarships go from 331,000 to 0? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but
It was Doug's book, so I didn't.
originally when the council appropriated money for graduate scholarships, it was a separate fund like that, and we managed it separately. Over time, it evolved. If we had more applicants for graduate than we had money, we funded it from the overall scholarship pot. And so, since we were managing it as one pot of money, we combined the AUs together in this year's budget.
Thank you.
We will still have a graduate program. Yes.
Councilor Laska.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the budget for higher ed scholarships, does that contemplate those changes that you're suggesting? And I know you gave us the different options, but which, does it take into account one particular option, or?
It takes into account all of those options. And there were other options that we considered and did not include in that when we ran numbers.
So all of those that I don't mean to cut you, I just want to make sure, all of those that you sent to us are is a decision made at least in the context of this proposed budget?
In the context of the budget and to generate a number for the budget, yes. And it contemplates them not being effective until fall of 2011, and it also contemplates a growth rate of 10%.
Will there be any, I know I asked at an earlier meeting, do we have to change the statute? And I think the guidance I got was we do not, which really means the administration arguably has complete discretion to change the criteria. But will the council have any other occasion to weigh in on how this is going to be structured? I mean, we're going to pass a budget. If we passed it right now, it would embrace all of those changes, at least implicitly. So I'm just wondering.
That's a fair question. As I said in last education committee, and that's the reason I raised all of those changes at that time, I want to have an open dialogue with the committee as to what the changes should be, how it should be managed. It has evolved over time, and at the committee's request, I went back and looked at all of those decisions that were made at various points over the past decade, and they were all discussed in committee and in fact moved and voted on. And I have a list of them, but they just evolved over time from 2000 to I think the last one was 2008, 2009. So it's been policy changes that have been made all along that brought us where we are today. So
if we pass this budget as proposed, I mean, is administration going to take that as ratification of all of those proposed changes and they're done? They're in place?
I would not be done. A policy has not been drafted. My intention would be to, once I had a policy drafted, is to come back and present that at Education Committee for your input, because in my view, it's best if everyone is on the same page as we go forward with this program, because it's a very large program, has a large impact, and these are very substantial changes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes, Melanie, what year did we include the out-of-state members' eligibility for scholarships?
We did the contiguous counties, which pulled in the contiguous in Arkansas as well. We did that. It was discussed in '99, but we actually made that change in 2004, it looks like.
Okay, and then what year did we decide, or how was it decided to do the whole United States?
It is the best that we could research is that it was done around the time that the at-large counselors were put into office. Is that right, Jennifer?
Was that through a vote of this body?
Yes.
And it may have also been a part of the
contiguous
BIA program.
Yeah. The original BI program, as the BI operated it, and of course, many tribes contracted it in the same way BIA operated it, was Pell eligibles only, but residency was not a requirement. You just had to be a tribal member of that tribe. Most tribes, when they took it on, kept it just as it was with no residency requirement, but Pell eligible regardless of where you lived.
But the BIA doesn't require that.
They don't require that, and so it's up to the nation to design it however we want to design it.
What would the difference be if we brought our scholarships back to the 14 county area with the contiguous areas also included? What money are we talking about?
The out-of-state is 116 students, and this is out of the 2,761 students that are being funded for this fall.
And
116 were out of state, 102 were in Oklahoma but outside the 14 and contiguous. So that brings it to 218.
And what is the cost of those 218 scholarships?
Well, it would depend if they're full-time, part-time.
What?
It would just depend if they're full-time or
But
part-time.
can you give us a figure of what the cost is for all of the out-of-state or out of the contiguous area
A
scholarships?
good estimate is just to estimate 2,000 because it would fluctuate each time someone applies from.
So that's about $439,000 per semester. So
And then-
that's not quite $1 million a year.
Yeah, 2761 is the highest number that we fund, is usually in the fall. Usually in the spring it goes down by about 600 students, so just FYI. It wouldn't be quite that high in the spring.
And that $1 million, if we pulled back a little bit, could that be factored in to, I mean, that would obviously increase, or at least maybe possibly maintain where we are now? Is that a possibility?
I don't know that I could speak to that. I could do some analysis on that and let you know.
Could you do that fairly quickly so that we could have that information before we vote on this budget?
I can.
Okay. And I know you're going to be gone tomorrow, so could you have someone bring that to us tomorrow?
The contiguous counties, I believe I was asked that as well. The contiguous number is 290. So those are in addition to the completely at large.
But if we stayed with 14 counties with the contiguous counties, we're talking 218 fall outside that.
Right.
And then I think you just said that if we didn't do the contiguous counties, that'd be 290 more.
That's right. And that pulls in Arkansas as well, of course, because it's
And
contiguous.
you can get us a more specific number by tomorrow, possibly.
In terms of
money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Councilor Coates.
Thank you. I just wanted to verify that, well, first of all, to reiterate that the out-of-district recipients are Pell eligible, first of all, every one of them.
They are.
And that one of the things that that you are considering as policy for fall of 2011 is an adjustment of the award from the Cherokee Nation on the basis of Pell funds that may have already been received.
That's right.
Whether in boundary or out of boundary, is
That's
that
right.
correct? Other things that you're considering are no longer funding students who have a 1.0 grade point average.
That's right.
In boundary or out of boundary. Right? Also, we are considering not funding students who are already receiving pretty much a full ride, such as at Haskell or other institutions, looking at what these things, what other, I'm just wanting to verify that these are some
Those are
of the
things we're
things
looking
that
at.
are being considered as changes in policy for 2011. And I just want to express very, very strongly that I think that before we go eliminating students who are out of boundary, we really do need to consider that we should not be funding people who have a D average or an F average, who are in boundary nevertheless, that we should not be funding people who have full rides already, and that since this is already part of the equation for changes in fall 2011, I just want to bring that to the attention very explicitly of this body, so that we don't go voting very radical things that are detrimental to the people out of Boundary when there are very reasonable, in my opinion, changes that are going to be made or should be made, even with those within Boundary as well. So I guess that's just what I wanted to bring to the forefront of the discussion here. Thank you.
Councilor Cobb.
That is essentially, other than one thing, what I was going to say. And Councilor Jordan, I completely don't disagree. I think at some point that may be something we have to look at, but I don't think we're quite to that point yet. I think while I would never say the amount of money is a drop in a bucket, the number of people compared to the overall total you're funding is I think there's probably other ways to solve this problem at this point. My concern has basically been the dropout rate, and at one point in those discussions it was approaching 40% or was right a little over, somewhere through there.
For freshmen, it could be.
For freshmen, that's what I meant. It was about 40%, so essentially you're throwing away about half your money. And I think I would like to see in your, and I know that's a pretty big chunk to bite off and chew, but that is going to have to be addressed.
Agreed.
Some way we can't keep throwing 40% away on freshmen. There's got to be some accountability there. I have no problem funding education. And Councilor, my point of that is I don't disagree with you. I think there's other ways in the beginning to maybe look at that. And in my mind, that's the biggest chunk right there. We've got to figure out how to do that. So that would be down on my list. Out of district, out of state would probably be a little bit further down on my personal list of things to look at. So that's my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Councilor Lawson.
Thank you, sir. I apologize. I know you sent us the information. I wondered if you or your staff could send it to me again so I can look at it. And number 2, just to be clear, all of the different scenarios combined is what this budget contemplates?
The ones I had listed in the PowerPoint, yes. It did not contemplate eliminating out of area or contiguous. It leaves those in.
Okay, so contiguous students, are they not eligible for Pell and non-Pell? Completely out of that area?
It's Pell only.
Pell only.
Yes.
And we've identified that number. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Crick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melanie, personally, I don't have a problem with some type of grade point requirement. For kids that's getting full rides someplace else or whatever are already, I think that's something to take into consideration. And also income levels. I guess where I've got a problem is, I hope I didn't vote on this scholarship outside the 14 counties. If I did, I was suffering from something. But and if we trim that back to the 14 counties and the contiguous counties, I don't assume that money will be used to provide scholarship for our people in the 14 counties with D's and F averages. I think a lot of our students have got much better averages than that. I won't be supporting money leaving the 14 counties for scholarships. And if I did before, I made a mistake. I'm sorry for that. That's all I got to say.
Continue, Mel.
Well, I think I was at the point of just answering questions that you might have, so.
Are there any other questions for Mel?
I'll be here this afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, one thing I want to point out, and it's going to be consistent throughout all of this book, after when you go past the charts in a particular group, and then you go past the commentary that gives some of the numbers and the explanations to why the numbers are moving, each group's going to have the same consistent reports behind it. And all I've done is taking thousands and thousands of budgets or line items and try to present it in a way that the administration came up with all these numbers. I just want to make sure that's clear. And the first set of report is going to be a budget-to-budget comparison, but it's broke out by department, like on page 6 for education, the lower right-hand corner on page numbers. The first group's childhood development, and I've given it to you by funding source, so you see where the money's coming from that childhood development's using. Budget-to-budget comparison, and then the comparison to 09. Now the report right after that is different. I mean, it's a totally different report. It's organized the same way by department and by funding source, but it gives you a 3-year history of what they've spent. It's the landscape report. And again, if you want to see what these programs are doing since 2008 against each year's budget, that's the report. It'll be in landscape form, and it'll be throughout this entire report. After that is the staffing report. And the staffing report will follow that same philosophy of giving it to you by department and by program in that same format that you're used to seeing of existing, vacant, and full-time. Okay? So I just wanted to say that there's a lot of information behind that analytical review where the commentary is that breaks it down to a pretty low level. Typically, if there's anything you're looking for, it's going to be back there, either in comparison to the prior budget or comparison to 4 years of history.
Councilor Jordan.
Yes, I think this is a further request of Melanie. Is she still here?
Yes.
Melanie, along with that other information that you're going to give for us by tomorrow, will you give us the dropout rates for both in area versus out of area, and then also break it down on the contiguous counties? And would you also address the issue of a possible payback provision and how that might impact our budgets? If we ask the people coming into the scholarship program to sign payback provisions, how many do we think then might not be interested in our scholarships?
That's really hard to predict, but
I'm really quite surprised that you didn't initiate that as one of the other 4 things, because that may bring your budget to a point where you can continue funding everybody at a full level.
What I would suspect, though, is that we would have students that might sign, and then collecting might be an issue.
Or you might have students that might not want the scholarship.
We would have a few that would deter them from. But there are other options also to look at, and so I wanted to explore some of that. Perhaps having them get a student loan, and then we pay the scholarship upon completion of the semester to pay the student loan back. Those are kinds of options I was thinking about that.
And
that we wouldn't actually have to outlay.
To the student loan, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Not that they wouldn't take the money and put it on the student loan, but it'd be nice if it was applied directly to the student loan.
Exactly.
If you've got kids, which about everybody in here does, that's probably college age at one time or another, those student loans are just too darn easy to forget about until they get out of college.
Until they get out of school, yes.
If you could bring us that information too before we make a decision.
And do you also want to know by class as well?
Yes, because I think the dropout rate goes down substantially after freshman year.
It sure does.
I think the issue on the 40% dropout rate is with the freshmen, and I agree with Councilor Cobb. We've got to get a handle on him. And I think if they're really wanting to go to school and planning to stay the course, signing an agreement with us would not be hard for the person that has the attitude, I will be here 4 years later, doing this very same thing, finishing up my education. Now, those that are there to be paid and play might look at it a little harder.
Councilor Collins.
I have 3 things, but that was one of them. Is it all possible to break down by class? Because it does change significantly. The second thing is I have been a little confused at times. The process, the thinking process, we seem to place significantly more emphasis on undergraduate than we do graduate. And to echo what Councilor Jordan was saying, I mean, obviously if they're in graduate school, they're kind of serious at that point. So I'm a little, I'd just like to know eventually kind of the thinking on funding those graduate scholarships, because I mean, those people, I would imagine your dropout rate on that is way down. I mean, those people are there for a reason.
Right.
And the next thing is, have you had any discussions, or has there been any discussions in committees reaching some kind of agreement with the major education institutions, at least in the state of Oklahoma, on how to handle this? If you don't go the pay the student loan route back, is there some way you can call OU and OSU and say, look, you know, I mean, we've got this credit rating, here's this student. I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but has that even been explored?
Well, I do think that we should go beyond payment policies, and we've been having a lot of discussions with RSU, NSU, and others that have a lot of our students about cohort programs, real support programs that our students access. A lot of the universities have good student support services, but our students don't access them. So if we were to build good supports and to keep those students in school, or at least have early alert systems when they start having some problems and can address them.
Let me ask you this, if I may. I went to the University of Kansas on a Division I track scholarship, and part of my requirement, I had no choice, is I had to be at this study hall, I had to be with this counselor, I had to be at least for the first year, my freshman year, because somebody was paying my way there.
Right.
So that's something to think about too. I mean, some kind of, but
I think you've got to pair up the two.
I've had this conversation with Diane Kelly, and she was, when she was at NSU, there was a support system that she said helped her tremendously. So maybe that's something. I'm getting way off, but those are the things. Okay.
It's
all right. That's all. Thank you. Councilor John Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I was hoping, and maybe this was part of it, and I missed that August Education Committee, so I apologize if we're rehashing. We have a wait list for directed studies, specifically in our RN program. We have an ongoing debate on this council at budget time and other times about unfilled health positions for RNs and MDs. And I have tons of people that if we can get them funding to go do those things, that they would come work for us. So are we thinking about retooling some of this money to meet that need, that shared need between our Cherokees and those unfilled health positions?
We have not, and in fact, while we could have grown the directed studies budget easily because we have the demand for the slots, to be honest with you, we just didn't have the revenue, the ability to grow that without influencing something else. And the cost per student obviously is much higher than other forms of scholarships that we do. So while we didn't cut it, certainly it's a priority. It was one that we couldn't grow this year.
I would anticipate that if we retool the scholarship program appropriately, even if with a decrease in revenue, we would be able to meet at least portions of that demand, where it would meet. We would increase the income for that family. We would guarantee them a career. We would meet our needs on our side.
And then I think if you address some of these things like the drops that we have from fall to spring, and you notice 2,700 versus 2,100, that's a lot fewer students that are going in the spring.
And one last question. So, like on the freshmen, which are a target area of where we obviously have a large dropout rate, we will then, at this time, when you're retooling it, you would anticipate that we would have a minimum GPA coming out of high school to apply for that too as well, right?
For the scholarship?
Like at least a 2 or 2.5 out of high school?
We had not contemplated that up to this point. It was maintaining a certain grade point while they're on our program. So it would at least give them that first semester. And if they don't perform that semester,
how are we going to, I'm sorry, I thought that was the last question. How are we going to address that first semester dropout where it appears that people are applying for our scholarship because the form is just one page and fairly straightforward, that they take that money and leave school.
Well, we know that we do have a significant number of drops, and it's primarily freshmen. The money is paid directly to the school, so we're not paying the student, but it doesn't mean that the money isn't wasted if they don't finish that semester and then continue to go on in college. So those are the types of issues that we'd like to address with maybe some policies around, particularly freshmen, because that's the highest level. So if we can address freshmen, I think we've addressed, and then also building these supports to address everyone that's in the program.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Fishing-Hawk.
Melanie, I know every hospital around here pays for LPNs to go to school at $3,000 a piece. Could you get one of their forms that they make their people sign? Because it don't cost them $3,000 to get an LPN. And every hospital sends their CNAs to them. And it's in the 14
You mean
counties,
their
'cause usually
employees?
it's the VOTEX.
Their employees? Yeah. And what we
That's all it costs.
do, we do
Books
our
and all.
employees as well, and if they leave employment, they're required to pay it back, and they sign an agreement. When you have an employee, it is easier because you've got their paycheck. So if they're required to pay it back, you have a way of collecting. My concern is that we enter agreements with students, and then what if they refuse to pay it back? Then we're in an endless sort of collection process.
After I've seen us chase some of the former counselors into the Supreme Court, there's no doubt in my mind we can get our money out of them. Probably the garnishment.
Councilor Jordan.
Just one other thing, if I'm calculating right, if we give out 2,700 scholarships in the fall, at the beginning of the school year, and we only have 2,100 of them will return, then we've had a net loss of 1.2 million for that year in lost revenue because the kids didn't come back.
Yeah. In some cases, there are graduations, or just didn't apply, and they continue in school, but it's a significant number of drops.
Melanie, if we could figure out a way to close that or keep that from happening, we wouldn't be here discussing reducing or eliminating some scholarships.
Well, we may not be. We certainly would be addressing another way to make it more efficient and fund more students.
And I certainly like the idea of asking your first-year students to get a loan, and then once they complete that semester, we pay that loan company back. We might even want to somehow work with a loan company in a cooperative type agreement to make that happen. And it's another thing that wouldn't hurt, folks, is the parents could go on the hook with the kids to make sure that if the kids don't come back, the money comes back to Cherokee Nation in some form. I mean, if I want my kids to go through college, I should be willing to place my signature on a note to make that happen, to give that child an opportunity. And then I would certainly be for, let's let all of them try it a semester or two. I don't like this idea of saying you got to have a grade point of a minimum amount out of high school to get into our program, because I've seen too many kids turn around between high school and college. And in my own family, I have some very prime examples that I could tell you about where they were terrible in high school, but they sure got serious when they knew that 4-year degree was going to make $1 million difference in what their earning ability would be over their lifetime. But I do think that we need to try to close that problem of how much we are losing. And I think that might entail asking the parents to step up to the table and invest in their children, as well as us investing in their children. And the children need to have an investment. And if we do that, maybe we don't even have to look at some of these more severe things having to occur. Thank you.
Councilor Thornton.
Trying to think here. There are grants out there that have the student doesn't have to pay back at the new school, right? And we want to have them pay back $2,000 a semester and have them sign, their parents sign that they'll pay it back. In other words, it's not a grant, it's a loan that you're talking about. And I don't know, these kids do a little work right now, you know, for the Cherokee Nation as they're going to school every semester. I don't know if it's 20 hours or what it is that they have to work.
The volunteer.
I don't see where we can get so strict that we're going to run these kids and the families come home. Well, that's what I'm looking at. And when you go signing for a loan, a lot of those parents don't have the money to pay a loan back. And that's the reason these kids receive these grants where they don't have to pay that money back. And I know it's hard to pay that money back. It took me several years to pay it back after I got out of school. And I don't see paying back $2,000 a semester, you know, if they could. Because most of them that's going to quit school quit first year. But that's just the way I look at it. I may be looking at it wrong. Y'all may know more than I do. And you may have a different class of people in your districts than what I had in mind. But I'd say I've got a township down there that has 80% low income. Now, what are we going to do for those kids? You know their parents can't pay that money back. They signed for a note for it. And neither can they. They're just struggling trying to go to school. And I think we're getting a little bit too harsh on this myself. But that's just the way I feel about it. And I want to speak up for my people down there that are low income and even lower middle income bracket. These people are not making a whole lot of money. They're trying to exist. So that's just the way I feel. Thank you.
Councilor Cobb.
That's what I was talking about on two things. Councilor Thornton reminded me of something is when I was talking about working with the universities around the drop date. And there's got to be a way to work around the drop date for some of these kids because look, if they're struggling and it's just not going to happen, that's why they have drop dates for stuff. The second thing is Councilor Thornton makes a good point, and that's why I was talking about when I was in school is, you know, there is something to be said for there are some kids that definitely want to get an education, but the foundation for some of these kids is different than other kids. So I'm not saying throw them to the wolves and go, hey, go to college. If you can't make it, you owe us our money back. There's got to be some way to get, at least at a minimum, somebody that they can get in front of and say, I'm having some issues here. If they go, that's obviously an accountability issue, but those are just things that I want to throw out.
Councilor Ross.
Mr. Chairman, if we've exhausted the discussion for now on this point, I'd move to recess to the normal.
I just had one comment.
Motion. Pardon.
I've got another comment.
I don't want to cut off discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councilor Watson.
My comment is just that they need to consider that if we have parents that won't do FAFSA forms, which I encounter that, then we need an alternative way if it is those kids without parental support can still get, and I'm not opposed to that. I think it might be, it's something we need to consider. Thank you.
Councilor Thornton.
I think a good doctor over there hit on something. That these students that receive these grants, or we're going to call them loans, or whatever it is, you could bring them in and counsel them, just like we counsel our people for housing, for the $15,000 loan, and prepare them for what's coming, because they're not prepared. They don't receive that type of counseling in schools. Very few schools do that, and I think Sequoia does.
We've talked about a freshman boot camp, something like that, to get
that would be a good way to turn this around and turn it back. I know several schools that don't have very good counselors. They do their job on a come basis, you know. If you're interested, come fine. If you're not, you go down the hall, you know. And I think we could have some counseling. And it probably would help us tremendously. And I don't know if you could advertise around and find some old school teachers or educators that would take their time and counsel us. I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Councilor Calhoun Watts.
Move to recess to 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are, one opposed, but we are recessed.